Deku, I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Chapter 8. Is this supposed to be a joke? So, Deku, you ready for your first internship? Izuku nodded as Miss Joke led the way into the agency she shared with several other pro heroes. He couldn't really believe he was actually going to be staying the week, learning how to be a hero. Yeah, he knew he'd made it into UA, but this just felt more real somehow. Okay, we'll drop your bag off in your room, and then our support department wants to meet you. Support department? Like the people who make your weapons? Miss Joke nodded. That's part of what they do, but there's more too. The support department of a hero agency provides us with costumes, gear, and weapons, but they also do analysis, help us track down villains, and gather evidence to turn into the police. Basically, kind of what you've been doing so far. That's why they're so eager to meet you. Okay. Joke led him up several floors to where they had several small rooms for internship purposes, and let him drop off all his stuff before going to another floor and leading him down a long hallway to a dark room filled with various monitors and a team of people Izuku had never seen before. Hey everyone! Hey Joke, who's the kid? Oh, him? Joke smiled and pulled him out from where he'd been trying to hide out behind her. This is Deku. Izuku gave a hesitant wave as the team stared at him. That's Deku? I heard Deku was young. It's just, he's tiny. Izuku shrunk in on himself as the whispers continued. Of course. Even Deku was cooler than him. He shouldn't have come. Maybe it wasn't too late to tell Joke he wanted to go home. He felt Joke put a hand on his shoulder, and he looked up at her. She was smiling. Why don't you show him what you got? She said softly. Hey, you got any videos Deku here could analyze? One of the support team pulled up a video from earlier that day, and pressed play before Izuku could even get out his notebook. A bullet quirk, but why are the bullets ricocheting like that? They seem to be breaking the laws of physics. Maybe a telekinesis quirk? Is that her quirk, or does she have a partner? She doesn't look betrayed when she's arrested, so probably no partner then. Most likely she brings along a limited number of bullets and then pretends to have a bullet quirk so people are more wary of her. Still, the speed she's able to move them are really impressive. Wow. Izuku stopped and tried to stomp down his embarrassment at being caught. It really is Deku. What? Did you think I'd lie to you? Joke laughed. I mean, you do have a tendency to pull pranks, so... Ha! That's fair. But I'm telling you, the kid's the real deal. Nearly gave us all a heart attack the first time we saw him, though. We were expecting some grey beard, then in walks a baby. The team laughed, and Izuku joined in. He really should be used to people being surprised at his age now, but he still couldn't figure out why. His analysis wasn't that spectacular. They were just being nice. So, Deku here's on an internship, and he's not cleared for combat yet, but I'd like him to have an earpiece so I can talk to him during patrols. One of the support team members nodded and fiddled with something for a minute before handing it to Izuku. That's a standard Hero Commission earpiece, plus some. It'll allow you to talk to the rest of the team, mostly just Joke and then probably one of us, and will allow us to see your location at all times. Izuku put it in his ear and smiled at Joke, who laughed and put an arm around his shoulder. Looking good, kid. You're all official now. So, Deku, someone asked. I have to ask, when and how did you get started on your analysis? Who taught you? Well, Izuku replied, I first started when I was about 4. He was about to say he thought it would help him make up for his quirklessness, but he wasn't quite ready to have that all out in the open yet. I thought it might help me become a hero. I had my heart set on it even back then. I guess it worked. That made everyone laugh. To answer your other question, no one taught me. I just watched the news and started making notes on what I saw. He shrugged. I don't even want to look back on my first one. I've still got it, but I'm fairly certain I wrote it at least half in crayon. There was complete silence, and Izuku turned to see every member of the support team staring at him with open mouths, while Joke simply smiled proudly. What happened? Did he say something wrong? Oh my goodness. One of them grabbed a notebook and a pen that had been sitting on the desk. Deku, I need your autograph. I don't care if you're going to be an underground hero, it's just... that's amazing. Okay. Izuku looked up at Joke, who nodded, then took the paper. Do I sign as Deku or my real name? You go by Deku professionally, so I'd probably use that one, Joke said. I sign everything as Miss Joke, because no one knows who Emi Fukukado is. She laughed. Izuku smiled. I did. You don't count. She ruffled his hair as he signed the notebook and gave it back. I'd actually like to ask you guys a few questions while we're here, he said. The head of the support team nodded. That's all we're here for. Shoot. So, about Miss Joke's laugh mask, did you design it or did a support firm? Does it work by focusing her quirk like Present Mike's directional speaker, or does it completely neutralize the quirk? If it doesn't, can it? How do you... They stayed for another hour or so, while Izuku asked dozens of questions, and the support team asked a few of their own. Miss Joke just smiled proudly the whole time. She was thrilled to have gotten Deku first for internships, but the other heroes couldn't argue. She had called dibs after all. Deku just looked so happy. In moments like this, it was hard to remember that no one had ever encouraged him, that he curled in on himself to make himself a smaller target, or that he stuttered and flinched when he realized he'd been rambling. By the time they'd left the support room, Izuku had filled up half a notebook. In his arms, he held the earpiece, as well as a plain black jumpsuit they'd given him. He didn't have a hero costume yet, so he'd just have to make do with that until he figured out what he wanted. Izuku didn't even know what he wanted for his hero costume. All his old designs had been heavily inspired by All Might, but that was too painful now, and besides, he wasn't going to be a hero like All Might. Miss Joke, he asked hesitantly, how did you decide on your hero costume? Joke hummed and brought a finger to her chin as she thought. Well, it wasn't simple, and my first costume looked almost nothing like this. At first, I thought I wanted something like a clown, but I just couldn't get it to work. Honestly, I don't know exactly what started on the pirate motif. I just kept stumbling in on the stripes and it kinda grew from there. Besides that, some of it's functional. Like, I didn't start with a bandana, but my hair kept falling in my face during spars and hero training. Same with my gloves. I didn't ever think I'd use brass knuckles, but the support department at my school suggested them, and I found that they really gave me an edge, especially since I had boxing training. She shrugged. I guess you start with something that sounds cool, then it grows from there as you get more experience and figure out what you need. Why? You thinking about what you want? Izuku nodded. I had some ideas when I was a child, but my goals are different now. I don't want to be flashy, I just want to make people feel safe. Except for the villains, Miss Joke teased. Except for the villains, Izuku agreed. He hummed. I wonder, would it be better to have an intimidating costume to scare villains, or something cuter to comfort victims? Well, for underground heroes, it's often better to scare the villains. You won't be doing as much rescue work as heroes like the Pussycats or 13, but that doesn't mean you can't completely ignore how the victims see you either. I don't mean that your costume has to be cute. Heroes like Edgeshot can be comforting to villains while still looking cool. She shrugged. I don't know what to tell you, kid. You kinda have to find a balance. What's going to look intimidating to villains while comforting civilians? Izuku thought for a moment. If I had to say, I'd almost want to say epic. Joke laughed. Well, When you figure out how to transfer that into visuals, let me know. Izuku smiled. Yeah, Epic seemed like a good start. All right. Miss Joke put her hands on her hips and looked Izuku in the eye. Here are the rules. Interns are allowed to tag along on patrols, but you have to do what I tell you to, okay? Izuku nodded. Rule number 1 is no combat. We'll probably run into a few villains tonight, but I'm the one who'll be fighting them. You'll be staying on the rooftops or in the shadows, analyzing the situation and making observations, but not fighting. Are we clear? Izuku nodded, but hesitated. What if you're in trouble and need help? Then you run and contact the support team. They'll send another pro to assist me, but you stay away. She sighed. I know it sounds harsh, but even if you don't have a quirk, you could still get in trouble if you step in. The only times you're allowed to fight are if your life is in danger or if I give you explicit permission in an emergency. Even if it weren't the law, your mom would kill me if you got hurt. She laughed. And then a razor would have to find some way to bring me back from the dead just so it could kill me again. But joking aside, do you understand? Yes. If you're in trouble, another pro will be much more help than I would be, and I don't have to worry about getting hurt or in trouble. He pouted. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Joke laughed again and ruffled his hair. Don't worry, kiddo. You'll have your license soon enough. Izuku looked up at her. So, what other rules are there? Joke's eyes lit up with mischief. Keep up! With that she ran to the nearest fire escape and onto the rooftops, while Izuku scrambled to catch up. No fair! Miss Joke was taking care of her third mugging of the night when it happened. Izuku was staying on the rooftops like he'd been told, muttering a live analysis of the fight into his earpiece, when he sensed something come up behind him. It was only years of dodging Kachan and months of combat training with a razorhead that allowed him to move out of the way, as a spiked fist came crashing down. Some hero brat. You're pretty creepy with your muttering, you know. The villain backed Izuku against the wall and swung his fist back. Deku! Miss Joke cried. But the muggers on the street below came at her and wouldn't let her leave. Izuku flinched, knowing that the punch would hurt, maybe even worse than Kachan's. When he opened his eyes again, he was staring at the ceiling. He brought a hand up to his face, expecting blood and pain, but to his surprise he was fine. What happened? Hey there, handsome. What were you doing in the middle of the night? Midnight? He said in shock. Did you knock out that guy? The heroine nodded. Sorry it knocked you out too, but unfortunately my quirk kind of just goes everywhere. But that brings us back to what you're doing on the rooftop in the middle of the night. Kiddo, are you okay? Did he hurt you? I'm so sorry. Miss Joke climbed up onto the rooftop, having finally knocked out all the villains she'd been fighting. She was nearly frantic with worry when she finally saw Deku at Midnight. It's okay, Miss Joke. Midnight saved me just in time. Oh, thank goodness. She turned to Midnight. Thank you so much. I told him to stay on the rooftop while I fought the villains so that I'd be safe. I wasn't expecting a villain to attack him. I don't know what I would have done if he'd gotten hurt. It's really no problem. I only regret that I had to knock him out too. Midnight looked between the two, and her eyes widened. Joke, you didn't tell me you had a son. Izuku turned red as Joke spluttered for a moment. He's not... Then she got a hold of herself and started laughing. He's not my son. He's my intern. Why do you think he was my son? Well, Midnight replied, you both have green hair. His is quite a bit darker than yours, but if the father's hair was black, like, say, a razor head. Joke turned red and smacked Midnight on the arm. Shut up, you tease. Aw, but teasing is so exciting. Midnight purred. But aren't you going to introduce me to this strapping young hero? Joke put her arms around Izuku's shoulders. Of course. Midnight, this is Deku, my intern for the week. Deku, this is the R-rated hero Midnight. Deku? Midnight was shocked. Like the analyst? Izuku nodded. It's nice to finally meet you in person, Midnight. Did you catch the blood villain from the last analysis I sent you? Midnight shook her head. You said the villain was probably a woman, so I handed the case off to Vlad King since my quirk wouldn't work as well. She squealed. You're Deku. Oh, you're so cute. I know, he's adorable, right? Miss Joke said. Adorable doesn't even cut it. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so small and cute. Right here, Izuku grumbled. All right. Miss Joke held up her hands in surrender. We'll stop. She paused. But you are adorable. Izuku groaned, and Midnight laughed. Well then, I'll let you get back to your patrol. Actually, I think we're gonna head home. That was enough excitement for one night, thank you very much, Joke said. Thanks again for saving him. You're welcome. Midnight waved to them as she left. See you at UA, Deku. The two watched her leave, before Deku couldn't contain himself any longer. That was Midnight! She's so cool, and her quirk's super useful. She uses her theme well too, even if it was controversial back when she first came on the scene. Miss Joke smiled and shook her head, as Deku rambled the whole way back. Chapter 9. What's in a Name? Come on, kiddo, we're gonna be late! Miss Joke called behind her, as Izuku scrambled to catch up. If you want me to keep up, maybe you could take some of my bags? Joke just laughed, but grabbed the duffel bag from Izuku's outstretched hand. To celebrate the end of Izuku's first preschool internship, they were going to dinner with Eraserhead, Mr. Brave, and even Sir Nighteye. Izuku was having trouble wrapping his head around the fact that the heroes wanted to hang out with him. They seemed to genuinely enjoy his company, which was strange. Even before Kachan had gotten his quirk, hanging out with him had required quite a bit of posturing, walking on eggshells and telling Kachan how amazing he was. Hanging out with the heroes wasn't like hanging around Kachan. The heroes teased one another, but they didn't mean to hurt each other. They laughed, joked, and talked about each other's interests. The heroes never cut off one of his mumblestorms by telling him he was annoying or creepy, instead adding interesting insights and asking Izuku to speak up. The worst that had happened was the one time when they were in the middle of a meeting and they told him they needed to move on, but that they'd like to hear his ideas later. On one hand, Izuku was the happiest he'd ever been, but however much he tried to ignore it, fear was bubbling just beneath the surface. It won't last. They'll grow tired of you soon enough. They'll realize how weak you are, and they'll hate you just like everyone else. Izuku shook his head and followed Joke into the 24-hour diner they were meeting at. Eraser insisted they go there because of everyone's patrol schedules, but Izuku knew he probably just wanted to avoid being around a lot of people. But it worked out with everyone's schedule, so they were going to dinner at 10 o'clock at night, and then Miss Joke would take Izuku back home, and he'd spend a week with his mum before his next internship with Mr. Brave. They were apparently the last to arrive, since the others were already sitting in a corner booth. Mr. Brave was telling a joke to Sir Nighteye, who was chuckling softly, while Eraser brooded with a cup of coffee and a tired energy that was making the waitresses steer clear. When they saw him, Mr. Brave waved energetically, and Sir Nighteye simply nodded. Eraser didn't acknowledge them, but downed the rest of his coffee and looked slightly less broody than before. Hey everyone, Joke said loudly, as she pushed Izuku into the booth and slid in after him. How was your week? The same as every week, Joke, Eraser grumbled. You were the only one with anything interesting happening. Joke laughed loudly, That's fair. I guess I really am spoiled after all. I had Deku all week long, she bragged. Mr. Brave rolled his eyes. Yeah, we heard you the first dozen times. He turned to Izuku. She's been bragging non-stop that she got the first internship, just because she called dibs. He rolled his eyes. It's like she's forgotten that he's gonna intern with all of us. He called the last part a joke, who simply stuck her tongue out at him while Izuku giggled. So how was the internship, problem child? Eraser asked. Izuku beamed. It was amazing! I got to watch Miss Joke fight and see how she used her quirk to take down villains. I even got to meet Midnight. Eraser gave Joke a look. You took a 14-year-old to meet the R-rated heroine? She ran into us while on patrol. And besides, you know she isn't that bad. They do let her teach at UA, don't they? Eraser sighed, and Izuku continued. I got to hang out with the support department too. They were a lot of fun, and they gave me a Real Hero Commission earpiece. You should have seen them when I told them he was Deku. Joke smiled proudly. They couldn't take their jaws off the floor after they saw his skills in person. One guy even asked for an autograph. Izuku turned a bright red, while the others laughed, and Eraser patted his shoulder consolingly. That's tough, kid. You're already famous enough to sign autographs, and you're not even in high school yet. I'm not famous, Izuku grumbled. Only heroes really know I exist. Mr. Brave shrugged. Maybe not, but among heroes you've got quite the reputation. We're all waited with bated breath the day that Deku becomes an official hero. Their food had arrived at that point, since the others had ordered for Joke and Izuku before they arrived, and they all started to eat. Nighteye looked at Izuku. That reminds me. Why did you choose Deku as your hero name? Izuku looked surprised. Deku's gonna be my hero name? The others just looked at him, and Eraser sighed. Yes, problem child. It's kinda too late to change it now, since you've already made all your connections with the name Deku, and everyone knows who you are. That's how I got stuck with Eraserhead. I honestly didn't care what I was called, so when we had to choose at the beginning of our internships our first year, I just went with the first thing that came out of Present Mike's mouth. Then I got a reputation during my internship, and the name stuck. Sorry if you wanted something else, kid, but that's the way the world works. Izuku nodded. I guess that makes sense. I just hadn't thought of it like that. You definitely chose an interesting name, Nighteye said. It means useless, doesn't it? I thought it was like Dekido, Joke said. You know, I can do it, because if anyone can do it, Deku can. Izuku blushed. I thought it was supposed to be ironic. Brave spoke up. Like, it's useless to resist, or something like that. Izuku laughed. Not really. I never thought of it like that. So, Eraserhead prompted. Why did you choose the name Deku? It's what my bullies called me because I was quirkless. Izuku was taking a drink, and so was oblivious to the looks of shocked horror on his friends' faces. Brave was the first to speak up. Deku is an insult? Izuku nodded. My best friend gave me the nickname when we were 4, because it's an alternative reading of Izuku, and I was useless now because I didn't have a quirk. Pretty much everyone calls me that now, even the teachers. We've been calling you an insult all this time? Eraser said angrily. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you tell us to call you that? Izuku played with his food for a minute, before responding. The day you asked if I had a code name was a really bad day. I'm usually okay at ignoring all the voices that say I'm not good enough, but... He shrugged. At the time, I thought you guys deserved to know exactly who you were working with. That I was just a worthless Deku, would never be of any use to anyone. The hero stared at him for a moment, It had never crossed their minds that Deku was using the name literally. They had never thought that maybe Deku called himself that because that's what he thought. Eraser wanted to find everyone who had ever hurt him, and make them undergo the same psychological torture that Deku had been subjected to for years. "We can change it," Jerk said. The others nodded. "It would take a lot of work, and normally I'd say it's more trouble than it's worth, but if it's an insult..." "Yeah," Mr. Brave added. "You shouldn't have to go by such a hurtful nickname for the rest of your career." Izuku shook his head. "Thanks, guys, but really, it's okay." He sipped his drink thoughtfully. "I don't think I mind it as much anymore. At first it was really hurtful, but people have been calling me Deku since I was 4, and I've gotten used to it." "You shouldn't have to get used to it," Eraser said angrily. "We've been insulting you for months." Izuku looked at him in confusion. "But it's not an insult when you guys say it." They stared at him for a moment, and he sighed. "You guys don't say Deku like it's an insult. I can't explain it, but it's something in your tone of voice when you talk to me. To you guys, it's just a name. I know that you guys respect me, so I don't feel useless when you say it. I feel..." He hesitated. "Appreciated. I feel like you guys have taken something I've hated for years and turned it on its head so it means something completely different than what it was meant to be. It makes me feel powerful to know I've taken even my old insults and made them my own. Does that make any sense?" There was a long moment of silence before Izuku yelped as Joke enveloped him in a hug. Brave and Nighteye didn't hesitate, standing up and moving around the table to hug him as well. "Get in here, Eraser!" Joke glared at him, and Izuku started laughing and crying at the same time. Eraser just returned a glare of his own. "No." "Just get in here and join the hug," Nighteye said. Eraser sighed heavily and rolled his eyes in defeat, but wrapped his arms around Izuku and the others. They stayed there for a few minutes until Izuku managed to stop crying. Could anyone blame him, though? Izuku beamed and wrapped his arms tighter around the heroes he was proud to call his friends.